is it worth it, I think, is the number one question that we always kind of get. And the answer is it, if it's the question of is it worth it, is it really depends on what you do with it. And one of the things that I kind of tell all of our customers, tell anyone who's even thinking about doing any sort of new system, is if you're not going to put in the systems and protocols to actually drive some improvement, some lever that's going to make life less stressful, make your finishes better, reduce treatment time, reduce office visits, whatever it is that you're trying to achieve, you have to put some energy and systems into actually executing on that. And so if you were to buy the most expensive braces in the world and you still see the patient every 4 weeks and you make them come in for 24 months, it's definitely not worth it in that situation. And what I'm going to kind of show is I don't think the right way to do it, and I'll kind of get into that a little bit. But one of the things to kind of consider is, are you really trying to drive this as a stress reducer, profit center? Is that the main reason? And if that's the case, then the main KPI you really need to focus on is reduction in the number of office visits and the reduction in the amount of doctor time at the chair at those visits. Those are the two things that are going to allow you to expand capacity or work fewer days or see more patients with fewer team members. And so those are the things that I think you should be driving towards. I was more interested when I set up my office here in Austin on how fast can I treat cases. I've always been really kind of just tackling what's that optimal efficiency. And the hard part for me was with trying to get that treatment time under that 14-month mark was, even with indirect bonding and then digital indirect bonding and then even CBCT integrated root indirect bonding, only seeing 50, 60 patients a day back when I was doing all this testing, is I had a really tough time getting below 14-month average treatment time. It was, it could get, that 14 to 15 range if we had good years and really good systems. But that was kind of my absolute kind of floor as to how efficiently I could treat cases with digital indirect bonding. And what I've been finding out of my own office is over the last 20 months, I think we've been tracking it now. I'll kind of give you the stats in a little bit. But my average treatment time over a year and a half period for comprehensive treatment is 10 months, 10.0. And so when I'm like, holy cow, already being pretty efficient, but to be able to cut off another 6 months on top of that is really pretty special. But again, I don't think that's for the average office. I mean, it really takes, your treatment coordinator, your whole team kind of presenting the cases in a way that's optimized for that. So I think the better KPI for all of the new people thinking about integrating digital is reduce the number of office visits, which means just bump out your appointment interval right from day one. Is if you sign up for KLOwen, what we recommend is if you're seeing patients every 8 weeks, go to 11. If you're seeing patients every 6 weeks, go to 9 or 10, because we want to just start bumping out that appointment interval, seeing patients fewer times, and the appliance is going to do a lot of the heavy lifting for you. And so although I was told I'm not supposed to start with kind of just sharing cases, I've been kind of compiling this list of cases for post on Facebook that hopefully will get out tomorrow. And I just think it's really compelling to be able to kind of see consecutive cases and everything else. So I'm just going to start off. These are the last 5 cases that we debonded. And so the first one of the things I get all the time from our doctors is my herpes protocol. I get probably more emails about my herpes protocol than almost anything else. And so, this is a case of a girl who has really thin phenotype and already has a little bit of kind of accelerated altered passive eruption on that tooth. So no recession yet, but she has a frenum that when you lift it way down, it blanches the tissue. When you bring it down a little bit, there's no blanching, but I obviously don't want to have those lower incisors just tipping out of bone, which is what I worry about with like class 2 elastics. And so this is a case where we planned herpes appliance, kind of see she's about 80% class 2 in the molar area on one side, about 90% on the other. And it's a 10 visit protocol. So we first bond the brackets, but using the same scan, we order the brackets and we order the herpes appliance. I use a mini scope herpes from Specialty. You could also do this with Amara. But we bond 5 to 5 on the top, 4 to 4 on the bottom. We have them back in about 5, 6 weeks later for SEPs. And they come back the next week and we actually install the herpes. So it's a single scan, but we're submitting everything. And I'll kind of walk you through the protocol, but So here we're bonding where the green lines are showing 5 to 5, 4 to 4. You can kind of see how this girl was pretty crowded to begin with. And then I'll usually have my assistants put the turbos on like the 4s or the 5s, just so we don't have to worry about those bands interfering with the bite turbos when you go to seating that next month. Here's the seps. Here's the mini scope herps. So I like to have it with the tube so I can actually start doing some leveling and aligning of the curvus B as well. And so you can kind of see with the setup, we're just reactivating the herps shims every 6 weeks to 7 weeks. A lot of times I'll put in a rectangular wire or square wire just to start getting a little bit of torque couple. And then once we've got that AP perfect and I don't have to add shims again, we'll leave them in that space for 3 to 4 months. And once they've kind of held that for 3 to 4 months, we'll take the herps off. We order from KLOwen a sectioned jig on the 4s, on the 5s, 6s, and 7s for the lower, and 6s and 7s, there's individual jigs on the top. So the assistant can take out this herps by themselves. There's no cutting involved. They put the brackets back on, and then we just start a class 2 posterior triangle to seat the posterior while holding that AP correction. And you can kind of see 9 months in, here we are looking pretty good. We obviously get on her about her brushing all the time. Here you can see that frenum a little bit better. But I haven't done any wire bending. I haven't done anything except for just take out the herps, let the wires do some work. And you can kind of see here's our initial, here's our final. It's a really nice interdigitation everywhere, nice overbite, nice alignment. And here's the final ceph. You can see if you look at the lip roll, how much improvement we have in just kind of that lower face volume. And the fun thing for me is, you know, with this herps appliance, a lot of times you'll get dumping of the upper incisors and flaring of the lower incisors. And if you look at this, is we actually increase the torque of the upper incisor while maintaining that lower incisor. So really nice positioning within the alveolar process. So 12 months start to finish, 12-month case for herps appliance, which I think is pretty impressive because typically you're thinking more like a 2 to 3 year process. Root alignment looks really good. So anyway, this is a great case, I think, to show just what's possible with custom braces. This is another case. We just took her braces off last week as well. And this one was another one where it was really thin connective tissue. And we also had it didn't look great on the CBCT. So we opted for upper premolar extraction in her case. And you can kind of see here we are. This is, again, just under 1 year treatment time. Really nice class 1. So you can see we've got some decal, which for whatever reason this summer, I've been seeing more decal than I think I've ever seen in my practice career. But, you know, I opted to get her braces off, even though these 7s haven't quite erupted all the way yet. They're coming in a really good place. So with the decal, we opted to kind of get the braces off, and we can always go back in those posterior. But really nice alignment. And again, I think what I want to focus on here is torque control, right? This was a 12-month extraction case. Normally you get dumping of the incisors when you have an extraction case, and you can kind of see with that custom prescription, we're really able to kind of maintain that upper torque and always obviously get really good root positioning. And then this was another fun one. He was just slight class 2 over on this right side, deep overbite, had some sensory issues. So we were a little bit worried about keeping him in treatment for too long and getting on the 7s for too long as well. But you can kind of see deep overbite crowding, and here he is at the end. And this one was done in 4 months. So it's really, I mean, I always like to say this was an easier case for sure, but I would say that this is a really nice outcome. And a lot of times with conventional braces, we end up making things worse before we make them better. And with custom, we can really dial in and just focus on changing the things that need to be changed, and really kind of that torque control really gives us the ability to I think, see treatment times that we haven't really experienced before. And so again, really nice incisor positioning, nothing too shocking with that. Nice pano. And then this was actually the case that was I think it's either my second longest case or third longest case over the last 2 years. So this was a patient that you can see he's got these pallidly impacted second premolars. And then we have a crossbite. And so this was an expander where we bonded upper 5 to 5. And then we ordered the RPE because we had to wait for these teeth to be extracted. We ordered that one later. We were able to still use that same scan, luckily. And then we inserted the RPE at, I think, week 6, and they did the turns, and we extracted the lower second bicuspids as well. And if you look at this case, so 17 months total in treatment to do 4 bicuspid extraction. The lower spaces are what really took us the longest to fix. I'd call this a pretty nice outcome. And again, 17 months. So, that's my second longest case or third longest case. The other two were at 18 months or 17 months. So it's kind of, he's right in that mix. But over the last 20 months of practice here, I don't have cases. I haven't had a case yet go over 18 months, which is really fun. And I think that my cases are good. These are consecutive cases. We aren't cherry picking anything. And it's tough to find things where you have 5 cases in a row where you can actually be pretty proud of what you're showing. Again, really nice management of incisor positioning, really nice parallelism of roots. I do wish these CBCTs had better. There's no root resorption at all. If you actually kind of just change the field of view, I always mess around with these things longer than I should, but really nice outcome. And then the last one of the 5, class 2, you can kind of see the overjet, overbite, some minor crowding and things. And she was just really good at wearing rubber bands. So I think this was a 9-month correction to get her where she needed to be. And so again, not rocket science, not challenging, but this was with very little effort from me. So usually it's all the appointments are done by my staff, except for 1 or 2 detailing bends. And I don't typically repo. The crazy thing is I've repoed 1 bracket over the last 2 years, and it was on the girl that I showed you second, which was the extraction case. It's before we had the CBCT integration, but really nice to be able to kind of see these types of changes, really good control. And again, most of this is delegated to the staff. The staff is doing the wire changes. The staff is doing the elastics. I'm only really wet hand dentistry for 1 to 2 detailing visits total, and everything else is delegated to the team. So anyway, really nice cases. And you can kind of see the average of those 5. So over the last 20 months, we're at about 10 visits, 10.0 visits on average. But for these 5, and I would consider these some of my tougher cases with that RPE extraction case, the herps and everything else. We just had a cluster. So this one was at 10.8 months on average. So let me switch over to the kind of the formal presentation, unless anybody has and would like to stop me before I do share the next presentation. Any questions coming up?
No, I think you've stumped everybody by starting with the end results instead of starting with the pitch, which I'm
sorry, Amanda. I don't know. It's more fun this way, I think. But all right, so let me pull up the other one really fast. What's that? Was someone asking a question?
Provocative. No, you're being edgy today. I like it.
So, just really getting into my journey with this was really trying to figure out how to get treatment to be more efficient. And really the problem is conventional braces, and I'll get into this a little bit later, but again, you saw kind of these last 5 cases, but I want to show you my very first one. When we moved to Austin, this is the first patient I bonded, upper premolar extraction case, super rotated lower canine. So a case that with aligners would be really challenging for me, at least. And you can see after just 2 visits, I use class 1 rubber bands to close all my spaces. So she kind of disappeared, and we've already got all that space closed. Yes, we lost the torque control by having those incisors dump back in because she wasn't coming in for appointments. But what you'll see is just by putting in the 1925 NiTi in the 1925 slot is we've recovered that torque very quickly. And what I love is this case was a patient who didn't show up for appointments, didn't do great with hygiene. I would have loved a little bit of short class 2s here, but I didn't know when I was going to see her again. So when I look at this case, looks pretty well aligned. And if you look at torque control and gradation, we really have beautiful control on all of these cases of the upper arch, where we have really nice smile gradation going from the canine back to the molar, and nice lingual interdigitation as well. And so this was 5 visits to complete her treatment, 13 months. And I only really sat down for this 1 appointment. So I did 1 detailing bend, the step out bend for a canine, and everything else is delegated to the team, which is awesome. And so just really quickly tonight, I want people to understand kind of why it's time for a change, because conventional braces, it's 40-year-old technology. We haven't seen an innovation in braces since really 1980, when Andrews came out with the prescription, when Bonacor came up with the composite bonding protocols, when we came up with nickel titanium. Since the 1980s, we've had a couple of iterations of brackets come and go, but the reality is there's nothing that's totally unique that every office uses today that they weren't using back in the early 80s. And so I want to kind of talk about what the custom options, how they help us get to the end result with less energy and stress. And then a little bit at the end, talk about the do's and don'ts of the custom appliances. So because conventional braces are a one size fits all solution, we as the orthodontists are reactive, right? We put the braces on, we watch the teeth move, we decide, oh, the teeth didn't go where I wanted them to go. So now I'm going to reposition, and I might reposition again, and then I'm going to wire bend, wire bend, wire bend. And then eventually, after all of that long, prolonged phase of detailing, we end up with something we're happy with. But all of that adjustment, all of that extra effort requires more time, more visits to the office, and more stress for the orthodontic team. And it's when you sit down for repos and detailing bends, that's when your schedule falls apart. When it's something that is a retie or a scan or an aligner check, those are never the things that throw off your office day. It's always the detailing bends. It's always the repositioning appointments that basically cause the office to kind of go into chaos. And so eliminating those is fantastic. And so if you think about even with digital indirect bonding, positioning a custom bracket or a conventional bracket perfectly, because you can't fill the slot or you shouldn't fill the slot, there's still so much torque play that you have no idea where those teeth are going to actually go. And this is why we reposition brackets. This is why we have to do so much wire bending, is even if you are perfect with bracket positioning, you are going to have teeth go not to where they belong. And it's really just because we have so much torque slop that we can never get where we want to be. And so I like to describe this when I'm talking to patients as if what conventional braces is reactive, and it's like having 8 connecting flights to get to your final destination, versus custom is really allowing you to take a direct flight going straight from A to Z. So we're not flying any faster. There's no more chance of root resorption. There's no more inflammation. We're not changing the laws of biology. The velocity of tooth movement is unchanged, completely unchanged. It's just accurate, precise tooth movement. And that's the important part. And one of my faculty members, Brent Larson, told me years ago that really, Brandon, there's no teeth for most malocclusions that have to move more than 5 millimeters during orthodontic treatment. And if a tooth can move a millimeter a month, theoretically, right, you should be able to get things where they belong in a pretty reasonable amount of time. And that's exactly what this is doing. So we're not changing velocity at all. It's really just about accurate, precise tooth movement. And you probably have heard this from a faculty member or someone else in the orthodontic community over time. And I believe this to be true. This is what I was set out almost 16 years ago to prove, that if we can just optimize bracket positioning, we are going to create the solution to all things. What I can tell you is, having tried 16 different digital IDB systems, it's absolutely false. For the reasons I showed you, is those teeth flop all over the place. And what we're trying to do is, by using custom brackets and being able to fill the slot completely, is now we actually get the teeth going where we want them to. So we were trying to reduce the amount of detailing appointments, repositioning appointments, the months of treatment time, and the office visits, while actually getting, I think, better outcomes, better results than I've been able to achieve in the past. And so if I want the teeth digitally to go to this position, I want to make sure that whatever I'm using reproduces that in the real world. And so that's what custom is all about, being able to fill the slot, being able to deliver that precise positioning. And because we're filling the slot with a 1925 wire and a 19.5 slot, is there's less than 4 degrees of total torque slop on any given tooth. And so even if you have 2 teeth that are on the extreme ends of that wrong direction of torque coupling, which is what I've done here, is these are 2 degrees each direction going all the way around, we end up still with the teeth in a fantastic position. There's very little that needs to be done. And here in the real world, you can kind of see that torque expression in the wire getting played out. But we want to be able to make sure that it's also repeatable and reproducible. So I had my assistant bond 10 cases, the same exact case, and I just had her do digital indirect bonding 10 times. And it's just about consistency, right? If you look at all these models, they're all very, very close to one another. So it's about being able to reproduce that result over and over and over again. So consistency plus that slot filling mechanics and customization is really how we scale this to where instead of having an MBT, so both of these bracket sets were positioned with digital indirect bonding. The one on the left is the custom solution. The one on the right is just an analog bracket. And the way that we tackle custom is, I think, the only way to do it affordably. And it's really important for me when I kind of set out on this mission that we didn't want to make the price point for custom so high that you couldn't afford it to do it on everybody. Because I used to use Insignia early on. And the problem I had was that it was $1,000 for the case. And I always had to, I wasn't saving enough visits to do this and eat that cost. And so when my brackets are $250 and Insignia's 1,000, that's a delta of 750. And so if you think of office overhead being $180 a visit, maybe $200 a visit, that's a lot of visits you have to save to make up that cost. And so we always would pass on part of that cost to the patient. So it was, hey, we can do custom. It's really cool, but we're going to charge an extra $600 if you want to choose that option. And out of 30 patient starts a month, I would only get one or two that would actually say they were willing to pay for the extra. So it was really important for me to be able to design a system where we can make the same amount of customization possible at a way lower price point, because we try and be below $500 a case when case people are doing this at volume, which means this is a full office integration thing. We don't want people to just dabble, because otherwise you're going to hate it, your staff's going to hate it, and you're not going to see the value out of it. And so most of our doctors pay under $500 a case for the twin brackets and a little bit more, I think, for the SL. But that's really important, because if you're paying $200 for brackets and it's only an extra $300 for custom, if you save 1 to 2 visits, you've hit your break-even point. You've paid for the appliance already. And what we want to push people towards is we want you to go from 19 visits, which is, I think, the US average on Gauge right now. We want you to get that to under 11 very, very quickly. And so if you can do that and you can shave off 8 visits, then all of a sudden your ROI is 5x, right? Is you're actually making more money by investing in the technology because of the efficiencies that you gain from it. And the only way to do that is to make the pieces ahead of time. And so we have, instead of just one profile bracket, as you go from the top row to the bottom row, we have a low, medium, and high. So if you need to move a tooth in and out, we have a bracket that'll adapt to that position. And then every 10 degrees, there's a new shape. And so I kind of like to say, if you were to walk into a shoe store, you can pick a narrow, medium, or wide shoe in a size 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14. So you can find the right fit for your foot. And you get 95% of the customization by selecting the right shape of the shoe. But you can also get the laces to tighten them up. And now you get the last 5% of customization. So when you buy a pair of shoes, you get 100% custom fit because of the laces element. And we use adhesive, the glue, when we do the indirect bonding to build that last little bit. And so by doing it this way, we can do it with metal, clear, self-ligating, twin, you name it. We have all form factors available, and we can do it at a lower price point and a faster turnaround than anybody else. And so it's the same workflow that you see with aligners. You scan the patient, you'll get a digital setup back from our lab, and then you'll be sitting down, hopefully for no more than 10 minutes. We really push for most offices to try and get to less than 7 minutes. And a lot of them actually are at the kind of sub 5-minute approval process. But we don't want this to be something that you're taking at home on the weekends. And the fun thing for me is the time that you save at the bonding appointment. Most of our doctors can do the clin checks for all of their cases during that window. So it's really nice. So you plan the case, you manipulate the teeth. And once you say, that's where I want the teeth, the software and our engineering team is going to reverse engineer the custom brackets for that patient. And every patient gets a unique prescription. And then we'll 3D print the trays and we load them with the brackets out of the kit. But you'll also have one of these kits in your office, so you can repair a loose bracket right on the spot without having to worry about ordering anything custom new or anything else. And so this little bracket kit fits in a really small tackle box and stores really easily in the office. And your assistants can either section the indirect bonding jig from the bonding and place that bracket back in and use the jig to position the bracket, or you can actually direct bond the bracket as well. As long as you grab the right bracket and direct bond it, you're within 5 degrees and within 0.2 of a millimeter to the surface of the tooth, which is still way better than what you're seeing with conventional. So you've got both options available. And then just like attachment delivery, same exact process. There's no difference in indirect bonding than there is in placing Invisalign attachments. except for we're ending up with brackets on the teeth instead of little blue or little white dots on the teeth at the end. And so again, I just want to reiterate, this is a 100% custom solution. You can position the teeth anywhere you want in three-dimensional space, and we're going to be able to adapt the bracket shape to deliver that position. And so the big thing for us is being able to do this in metal is really an awesome thing, because having a custom base, then there's some other products out there like Incognito, Harmony, and like Braces on Demand, Light Force, that'll make a custom base that hugs right up against the surface of the tooth, which is great. It increases, basically, you're trying to reduce loose brackets, right? You're trying to prevent brackets from breaking off during treatment. That's the big benefit of a custom base. But by having these semi-custom bases and then filling the last little bit in with adhesive, because we're using a metal bracket, because we have a big gingival offset, we actually see a lower breakage rate with our system once people clear the learning curve than they were getting using direct bonding before. And also, from what we've seen in the literature coming out from some of the competition, is our bracket breakage rate is actually lower than almost anything else that we've seen out there. And it's because of that big gingival offset, the fact that the tie wings don't stick out as much, and it's a metal bracket, so it's stronger. So we're not going to have things fracturing and breaking. And then if you look at this one tooth that had the biggest gap, so I just wanted to highlight that in the indirect bonding tray, you'll just add the tiniest little bit more, and you can see that amount to add pretty easily just as you're looking at the bonding tray. But that's going to build that last 1 or 2 degrees of customization. The more important part, and this is what nobody focuses on, and this is what I learned with Incognito, is if you fill the slot, the marginal ridges, the gradation of those buccal segments of the upper teeth as you go back, that's the secret sauce, filling the slot. And so we designed our bracket to be 19.5, so you can use a 1925 wire. And we have a couple of wire manufacturers that manufacture wires to the tolerances that really fit with our system. And so when you put those two things together, that's where you get that less than 2 degrees of torque slop each direction. So less than total of 4 degrees of torque slop, as opposed to 20 to 30 degrees with that 1925 in the conventional one. And so again, even if you get the brackets perfectly positioned, if you can't fill the slot because you don't have the right morphology, and you shouldn't fill the slot, you're going to end up still having to chase the result. You're going to still be doing repositioning and detailing, even if you're doing digital indirect bonding. And this was fun. I at our angle meeting back in February in Florida, I had Dave Sarver bond this case. So there was a malocclusion model. I had him bond the case, and I had him position everything. And when you put the 1925 wire in, the case looked beautiful. You could hold the teeth, and they looked really, really nice and perfect. But then we put in a 2225 steel wire. And what I want to show you is not having a custom bracket and filling the slot creates so many problems. But number one is this tooth, this lateral incisor, you can see, would have been out of the bone. This premolar would have been out of the bone. This premolar's lingual cusp was plunging down so low that there was like a 7 millimeter height discrepancy in the marginal ridge between the 5 and the 6. So unless you know the morphology of the bracket, you absolutely should not fill the slot. And also realize that most of these bracket prescriptions overcorrect, assuming you're not going to fill the slot. And so I've had people come up to me after my lecture when I don't really clearly state this, thinking, oh, that's good. I just use a 2225 wire. And I'm like, oh my gosh, that's the worst thing you could do. So please just take note that don't fill the slot. Brackets aren't designed to fill the slot unless you're using a custom solution. But when you are using a custom solution, especially on the upper arch where you have a thick phenotype and plenty of bone to work with, getting to that 1925 wire is really, really critical. And one of the things we're really excited about is the launch of, and it's just as of, I think, about 5 weeks ago, in July 1st, we officially launched for sale our self-ligating metal bracket. And it's been one of my favorite things that I've ever gotten to try. It's crazy to watch the PSL benefit of that early unraveling, coupled with such tight tolerances in the finishing stages where you don't have to worry about those in and out bends, to be able to get, such amazing results. So it's basically trying to take the best part of the initial phase of the unraveling, but making the slot tolerance. So this is a 19.5 by 26 slot. So when you put in a 1925 wire, there is no rotational play and there is no torque slop. It is going where you want it to go. And this is my wire sequence. So I'll use a tandem 12. So I really start getting a lot of good first order expression early on. And if you have a really displaced tooth where it's too much to get two wires in, I'll just put one of the two wires in and let the other one go over the top. I'll show you in a second that you can add a spring over the top. So I'm using a tandem 1219. And then it's really easy to jump up after, usually a couple months in that tandem 12 straight into a 1425 NiTi. That's when I'll pick up the sevens. And with the FL door on the sixes, it makes it pretty easy to get that 1425 in. And then I'm going up to the 1925 on the top. And again, you can kind of see the scrap rate that we throw away a lot of the brackets that we manufacture to make sure that the tolerance of this are really just as good or tighter than the twin bracket. So again, there's a little bit of play, but it's going to be to the point where even if you get the maximum displacement, you're still going to have to make a tiny little adjustment in order to recover. All of the doors open gingivally. So it's got the screwdriver technique, so you don't have to worry about calculus buildup. But I also hated when I had active self-ligating that I'd have to shut all the doors just to check the occlusion, and the assistants would have to open them again just to put the wires back in. So everything except for the sixes opens gingivally. The sixes open occlusally just because of that hook. But a lot of times the assistants won't even open the six door. They'll just slide it in like they would otherwise. And just to show you kind of a few of the cases that we started early on, this was a class 3 case. You can kind of see we were already just 4 months in. He's doing a great job with rubber bands. And we were already close to class 1. And you can kind of just see the arch development that we have. And so if I were getting critical of myself, I should have bonded this second molar 2 visits ago, and I should have taken off the bite turbos because he probably would be done by now. I think these shots were from May, but he's still slated to get his braces off in September, and he started in January. This was another case. It was actually one of the ones I just showed you earlier. She was finished in 9 months, so you can kind of see at the 3.5 month mark. She's already looking really good. We took the CBCT. And so you are going to still have to place bends, but it's not going to be everywhere. I always like to say, you still have to be a little bit of an orthodontist. And one thing that I've learned is I was able to really reduce the number of detailing appointments that I had if I waited for them to get to class 1 before I actually started doing the adjustment bends. A lot of times I was tweaking for anterior aesthetics, and then we get them class 1 and I'd notice, oh, that 4 isn't seated, so I need to do some vertical steps to kind of get that seated. So now I just usually wait till they're class 1, get the wires out, do 1 detailing visit, and if I have to, a second. I think on average right now, our cases are finishing with 1.6 detailing appointments. And like I said, 0 repos except for that 1 over the last 2 years. So simple adjustments made, and I already got to show you her final, but this was, I think, right before we were getting ready to take her braces off at the following visit. So this was another case. I think that's really fun to show just the unraveling potential of PSL. He's class 1. He was just sliding forward at the bonding appointment because we didn't put the bite turbos on yet. And you can kind of see with his case, what I really like to show is this first order I haven't done anything with, but if you look back to the beginning, we have quite a few in and out discrepancies with the 4 to the 5 to the 6. And if you look already, just by putting in that 1425 wire, we pretty much have unraveled all of that first order issue. So having those variations in thickness is something that nobody else offers aside from like Light Force. And so it's really critical to be able to minimize those in and out step bends. This is the kind of technique that I show where I have 1 wire initially going through the 012 going into this lateral and this central. And then we had the second 012 with a coil spring over the top. But at the second visit, this is like a 2-minute visit. I don't schedule very much time at all. And all we do is we clip the open coil after we open the door. And then we just stretch open the open coil, seat the bracket, seat the second wire in, and then shut the door. So it gives us add 1 bracket activation or half bracket activation in each spot, but 1 over the combined. And then so it's tightening that coil, and it's also now doubling the protrusive force on that incisor. So I'll just show you this little video. Just quick open the door. So we tell the patient, we're not taking your wire out. We're not doing anything else. We're just going to see you for a quick adjustment here. And then we take the lid cutter, cut that coil right in the middle on both sides. So not only are we trying to reduce the number of appointments, but I'm also trying to reduce the length of the appointments. Are there any things that you can do where instead of having the patient come in and taking the wires out and letting them go brush and doing all that whole fanfare, are there appointments like this where it's just, hey, let's see you for a quick spot? Another one that we use a lot of times since we use grin and dental monitoring, and I can't quite tell if they're class one, is if it looks like they're close to class one, but I can't really tell, is I'll just have them pop in for a 60-second appointment where I just really have them pull their cheek out and bite together. And I see, are they class one or not? And so I can get a better angle of that. And then we document it. So again, it's really just about trying to reduce your office flow, reduce the stress, reduce the appointments, and reduce the doctor time. So here you can see before, we've got the coils going all the way across. Now we've got them more active, but both wires going through. And you can kind of see again here already at the first week, because of that first order, tandem 12 filling the slot. And you can kind of see just how even 1 week in, we already have pretty awesome leveling alignment happening. The bottom you can kind of see. So he was finished in 4 months. We just debonded him in June. So, when I start thinking strategically about how do we effectively implement custom, because I don't want people just doing the same thing, is a non-extraction case where you can bond all of the teeth. Really, you should be shooting for 6 visits. Now, you may need to do one more visit if you have a really displaced tooth here between visit 1 and 2, where you're re-engaging those tandem 12 wires. You may have another detailing appointment here after visit 5, but really it's really just trying to establish protocols of how can you start strategizing to reducing the number of appointments. And even if you go from 6 and you're at 10 instead, the average US orthodontist is seeing 19 appointments for comprehensive cases. So even if you can cut that from 19 to 10, your schedule doubles, your capacity explodes. And so just start thinking about how can you do things. In every case that I do, I'm like, well, how could I have done this better? How could I have been more efficient? These are all the things that I'm always thinking about as I look at my cases. Because by no means do I consider myself, a perfect orthodontist. I'd say that you can find flaws in every one of these cases for sure. And that's why the ABO gives us 27 points for a passing score. But what I will tell you is I feel like in 10 months, these results that I'm getting are way better than what I was getting with conventional and spending, much more time than that. This was another case you can see just super rotated fives. So we did upper bicuspid extractions, crowded on the bottom, and you can kind of see 6 months in, we've almost got that space closed, and we've really done a great job of unraveling all of that lower crowding. So you can kind of see really how deflected everything was at the beginning and how far we've come. This was another one. She's actually already out of braces. So we put her braces on in April and we took them off in, I think, the end of June for she had a family event. So we finished her to class 2, like 1 millimeter class 2 on both sides. So that's why I didn't show her earlier, because I have her just wearing class 2s off of her retainers, but we made sure that the arches were compatible. So we printed her models and they fit together perfectly in class 1. So we were able to get her in braces in and out in 4 months. And then she was able just to kind of get the last couple months using the Essex retainers with some hook attachments. So really nice improvement. I'll actually pull up her grin scan. She's actually my assistant. So she's given me permission. But what I love to just show is, we had this really overexpanded bicuspid to begin with. We had midline asymmetry. You can kind of see all the places where these wires are deflected and how just really quickly everything's kind of resolving. And so just to show a couple of our other early doctors doing some really cool stuff too with the custom. So it's not just me that's kind of seeing these outcomes. We've had a really good tier of kind of beta test doctors and alpha test doctors that have been testing this along the way too. But I'm really excited about it. I have a feeling my treatment times will actually drop another month or so just by implementing and just the low friction mechanics on the front end. So just some of the do's and don'ts. The one thing I can tell you is, you gotta focus on actually making yourself good at this. Just like same thing with aligners is I still kind of suck at aligners, but I've gotten a lot better because I've gone to some courses and I've focused on time. But if you don't do that, you're not going to actually maximize and optimize this. And so, we have a study club that meets just with our customers every month, and we have user meetings and other things that we try and gather people on. We have tons of webinars and lots of on-demand content. So, really learning just how to use the software, how to, just manage case flow, which wires to use, different biomechanics strategies. So I think dedicate some time to learn and realize that you need to help your team with this onboarding process as well. One of the things that I can tell you is people who don't have a good team or good leadership within their team have a really tough time implementing all the systems necessary to execute this well. Another big thing that I would tell you is if you decide to try this and you say, I'm just going to do a couple of cases, save your money. It just doesn't pay off. What we've been doing is tracking over the last couple of years the offices that are still successful and still using the custom system. And what we found was it was really interesting, but it was 6 cases a month or less. If you're doing less than 6 cases a month for your first 6 months while you're getting kind of that learning curve and having your staff get used to it and getting the muscle memory necessary to do the digital indirect bonding and just knowing how to repair loose brackets, what the wire sequence is, all the new flow, we had less than a 10% success rate. Like our retention of that customer who is just dabbling is less than 10%. And so we spend a lot of money to send trainers out and do all these things. And what we just found is if you're not going to commit at least to 6 cases a month, your team is going to hate it. You're going to hate it. It's just going to be stress and no benefit. You're going to feel all this stress, but you're not going to get any of that custom efficiency that really is. But if you do more than 6 and better off, if you really try and go all in for a period of time, and you really try and adjust your schedule and coach your team and get the TC room and the clinic team kind of coordinating on how to roll out the process and really leverage custom. And the best way really to do that is just space out your appointments by 3 to 4 weeks more than what you're already doing, because we have so many doctors that start with KLOwen and they say at month 9, Brandon, I'm done. But I told them it was going to be 18 months. So we just are having them come back to do reties all the time. And that's not, good leverage of your time. And so rather than do that is say, hey, we're not going to pull you in as often because we don't want you missing as much school or work, but we'll still see you. This will still be an 18-month treatment, but we're going to see you every, 10 weeks instead of every 6 or whatever that might be. So make that part of the action plan. Make sure everybody on the team knows that it's part of the action team. So, on top of those other cases that I showed you right before we did, I hosted an innovation summit with a whole bunch of other really cool doctors and companies back in March. And so these are 10 cases in a row that were just the 10 that happened to be finished right when that one was coming up. I'm going to just blast past this a little bit. But, this is what kind of we want people to think about is, we find that across the board offices that fully implement this, and we look back 2 or 3 years later, on average, you're going to save 7.1 visits. And if you think about if your front desk doesn't have to schedule 7.1 extra appointments for every single braces patient that you start, if your clinical team doesn't have those 7.1 appointments, if your TC knows that you don't have to do all of those extra detailing and bending appointments and knows that you're going to come straight into the TC room, and for the patient not having to wait for the doctor for 40 minutes and having them be busy and not having as many appointments, it's really just kind of a win-win-win for everybody. And so when we come into an office, it's not just about the benefits for the doctor. We really, really focus on making the staff realize that this is to make their lives better too. Because if they don't have to wait for you to sit down and repo and wire bend, it's going to free up the schedule, and it's going to reduce the friction between the TC room and the clinical team that busy offices so often face. And so we just took our 10 cases in a row, and what you'll see is something pretty similar. Extraction case, idiopathic condylar resorption TMD patient. We stabilized her for a year with a splint. You can kind of see that big overjet, and in a year we closed everything up and had a really nice outcome. Same thing on the left side. You can kind of see everything went right to plan. And this is 12-month treatment and 0 repos, 1 loose bracket, and 2 detailing appointments. So, pretty seamless, pretty easy. And this was another case. She had no canine guidance. It was fracturing the porcelain off of that crown. And so we basically went in and really quickly gave her canine coupling, and you can kind of see the improvement in the alignment. So this is from September 21st to January 9th, and she got her braces off. I think 3.5 months was her total treatment time. So another case that I think is really cool. This was our twin bracket case, but she was only touching on her first molars because there's some torque issues. Class 3 a little bit on the right, class 2 on the left. So we had her wearing some rubber bands pretty early in the process. And this is less than 3 months. So June 15th to September 7th. And you can see already, like I would have actually probably debonded her the month after this had it not been for a lower left second molar that was coming in way too far to the buckle. And so we waited and saw her 2 more times to bond that bracket. But just torque control is such a magical thing, right? It's just really neat to see when you get those plunging lingual cuts out of the way, what we're able to accomplish. Unfortunately, this hook on this bracket broke, and so the power chain didn't close that space. So we just did 1 extra week of power chain to close up that gap. But another idiopathic condylar resorption case. I treat a lot of TMD, so we see more of these than I'd like. Poor condylar positioning. It's tough to see here, but you have a really irregular surface of the condyle. It's not like delineated and white corticated. So we stabilized her for a year with eccentric splint. And then this is where she was after splint therapy at kind of that open bite crowding. You can kind of see December to April. And so you would look at this and say, that looks awful. I should be getting better out of a custom system. And this wasn't our full size wire, so we didn't have torque expression yet. But you can kind of see by September here, I just did 2 simple bends on the top, 1 bend on the bottom, and the case is looking good. So again, you still have to be an orthodontist. You're still going to have little tweaks, but most of the time it's going to be less than 5 visits. And here you can kind of see at the day of debond, really nice outcome, right? So you think about that class 2 open bite condylar resorption. Her condyles have moved quite a bit forward from where they started, and they're very well corticated now. And so, just beautiful to see what's possible with these custom appliances. This was a case where we just extracted the lower premolar. I think she is the longest one. So Jason, who I showed you earlier, who had 4 bicuspids with the RPE, was my second. This was the longest because she had TMD and we had to bond all of her third molars. And she came in for so many pokey wires and soft flow visits. But we ended up in 18 months with, I think, a really nice outcome, just extracting that lower premolar and getting everything closed up. Another TMJ case with a functional slide off of I'm sorry. This was the very first metal self-ligating patient that I ever bonded back in October. And she had some TMD issues and has a crossover wear. You can kind of see the crowding on the bottom because those canines weren't expanded to get coupling. But she came back in 4 months, and she basically told her parents that we were taking the braces off that day, no matter what. And she kind of ran the household for sure. And so, this is one of those cases that, we did everything we could on our end. She was just kind of making it challenging to kind of finish the job. So we ended up doing some aligners. So I designed 5 aligners in order, and I think this is a pretty easy to get to that little bit of kind of closure. But she was the worst patient at the aligners too. Like, she didn't make it past the first week with any of them. She kept losing them, breaking them, forgetting them. And so what we ended up with at the end of the day was this tooth shifted even worse back to where it started. And so, this is one of those cases where you throw your hands in the air. And I think it's really good though. And that's what I love about consecutive cases is there's nothing to hide. We get decal, like I showed you earlier. We get these cases where you don't get the compliance you need. But when I look back to where we were here at 4 months when she decided to have us take the braces off, if she would have let me put the 1425 Nyatai wire in the month before, but she didn't. She said, you can't change the wires today. I think we would have had really, really nice alignment down on the bottom. But anyway, it is what it is. And we ended up better with the overbite, but by no means am I happy with where we are on that one. This is the one that I was talking about that had the functional slide off of that scissor bite. And this is a pretty straightforward TMD case that we were able to get lined up pretty quickly. And then I like this one a lot because her mom was the hygienist for our biggest referring doctor, who's a big Pinky Dawson guy. And he was noticing tooth wear because she doesn't have canine guidance on either side. And one of her big complaints was just the proclination of the upper incisors. And so we talked about extractions. I would have loved to have done extractions, but she was definitely not having any of that. So if you look from September, braces off already in February, but you can kind of see the activation there where the canines are just extruding those teeth. And now we have really nice canine guidance on both sides. And if you look from the side, you'll notice that I wasn't able to get, full reduction of the proclination, but it's definitely better, right? As we make a marked increase, and we're kind of limited by the confines of the alveolar housing. But and then this was another case of just a great cooperative patient where he was, 50% kind of class 2 through the canines, a little div 2 appearance. And in 6 months, he just rocked it for us and gave us a really nice outcome. His second molars looked like they were coming in a good spot. With these cases going as fast now I'm having to typically wait a little bit later now for eruption of the second molars, especially if it looks like they're in a precarious spot. And then this last one was just an adult patient who I really, really wanted to extract. I hated how full her lips were. I hated how proclined she was, but she was one of those that is, I'm not going to do anything if we're taking teeth out. And so we were able to, I think, get her a really nice outcome in, just a really short period of time. And so if you look at those 10 cases, I showed you 5 even earlier. These are, again, 10 in a row. And if you look at the treatment time and the number of visits and the number of repos and the number of detailing visits, and if you realize that there were 2 of the patients that kept coming in for soft flow application, which sometimes that's our biggest nemesis, really there were only 7 active treatment visits where it was involving anything more than just a pokey wire or adding soft flow. So 7 versus 19, is a total game changer. And of those, this is me. I'm only 1.6. The bonding, debonding, all of the other reties, everything else is delegated to staff. And again, we've been tracking just over the last, I think it's like 19 or 20 months now. We're at 10.0 months is our average comprehensive ortho treatment in our office. So not again that you should shoot for that, but I just want people to realize that if you're using precise, accurate, directed tooth movement with a custom prescription and use it the right way, it can totally transform your schedule. From, if you think about, this is the time studies from my office in Colorado. This is kind of how long everything was taking to treat a single case with all the adjustments needed, those 19 visits, and how much doctor time, how much time the staff would put on the call doctor button and wait for me. And this is what, if you could actually start 3 patients a day and have all of those appointments with deband and debond. So keep a status, kind of steady status of new patients being bonded and debonded. So 3 bondings a day, 70 patients plus per day, and then anything else is kind of the aligner observation column. And that's how most offices get over that 120 plus visit threshold, is by doing more digital share a chair, which is what custom of any sort really lets you do. So being able to look at my schedule now and say, this is what I'm doing, and I can compress each and every patient into this block of time, and I can have this much doctor time, and I can have this much clinical wait time, is what you're going to see is over while you're clearing out your analog. It's going to slowly happen. You're going to slowly see spots open up in the schedule. But by the time you get to 24 months, it is crazy. You can actually squeeze all of these patients into 2 columns. And so it's really amazing to be able to hear all the stories from people who truly adopted this, where they say, there's so many that went into panic mode where they were freaking out at kind of 12 months and saying, where are all of our patients? And they'd all run up to the office manager, and across the board, it was, we're up 30% or we're up 50%. We're growing. It's just that the doctor is not having to run every which direction. So your day as the clinician really gets lightened a ton. And the other big thing that we like to coach people on, early on, if you decide to kind of accelerate the debond rate, is there's going to be a time at about probably 14 months where you have your conventional braces patients finishing on time, but you're going to have a cluster of new custom cases getting finished ahead of time. So you're going to have a block where there's maybe a month or 2 or 3 where you may need to add an extra debond day just to clear those debonds out of the schedule. It's something that happens pretty much ubiquitously across all of the busy practices that implement the system. So those are things just to kind of know going in. But don't panic. We have a great team to train you and also to be there to support you. The sales team is awesome. We have a training team that's fantastic as well. So anyway, I would kind of like to close with this analogy because it really, to me, focuses so spot on with kind of what when I think about if you were to go back in time and do a zero prescription bracket, how much would your life suck? Right? If you think about now, I have to start really bending every single degree of rotation, torque, tip, everything. And now I have to figure out what wire shape do I want, what wire dimension, what loops am I going to use, what T loops, what are you going to do to get the teeth where they belong? And so if you think about this from, the game of golf is if your driver can only get you, a fourth or a third of the way down the hole, then you're going to have to pick up that club a whole bunch of times. And even if you're perfect, you still are going to have to take a lot of strokes to get the ball in the hole. And the reality is you're going to have some teeth that don't cooperate, and it's going to take you a little bit longer, and you may have a couple of, hazards to meet along the way. Or if you're as good a golfer as I am, you're ending up taking forever just to get that stupid thing in the hole. And so that to me is going back to zero prescription brackets. That's where we were pre 1980 when the Andrews came up with the bracket prescription, and it totally transformed an office from seeing 10 patients a day into 60 patients a day. That single technology allowed us to delegate more to the staff and get better results, not inferior results, because it got us so much closer to the hole right out the gate. And so that's where I think, this bracket prescription allowed us to get in realm of now I'm not thinking about, do I need to use crazy braided wires? Do I need to use which wire dimension? Which loops am I doing? How am I going to close this space? Now all I'm thinking about is, hey, do I want a repo or do I want a wire bend? Those are the only two things. So it's a lot less to consider when you're closer to the hole. With custom, the fun thing is you're going to get a lot of teeth that are hole in one where you don't have to modify or move anything, but even the ones that aren't should be an easy putt. So this is not changing where we're trying to get at the end. It's just getting us there closer to the bullseye, closer to the hole, right off the bat, instead of having to reactively get all of these teeth shuffled and directed back to where we belong. And so, if I were to make some predictions, I think remote monitoring custom solutions within 10 years, this is going to be the market. Just like nobody uses zero prescription brackets anymore. This isn't like this. There's been, I know, big talk and battles on Facebook. This is simply just getting closer to that final goal. We're not changing tooth movement velocity. We're not changing anything that we're doing other than we're designing this with the end in mind. And because we're doing that, the appliances are taking us closer to where we want to be, which means that we as orthodontists actually have to be better at the front on diagnosis and treatment planning the case properly. So this is never going to be something in my mind for general dentists to use. It really has to be an orthodontist that really understands the biomechanics of doing all the different types of malocclusion corrections to really dial this in. But if you know how to diagnose and treatment plan a case, and you're backed with a better tool, it's going to make all of us better. So again, going through the kind of learning ejections, hopefully now you can kind of understand why I don't think conventional braces are going to survive for too much longer, because just like Zero RX is not around anymore, once people really understand the efficiencies and how to use this new tool, and I don't care if it's just our system, I just think custom as a category is going to make us better orthodontists and reduce the stress of our staff, of our team, and of our patients as well. So just to kind of close, this is absolutely a false statement. If you put the braces in the right place, the case treats itself. Digital indirect bonding only gets you so far. You get much better efficiencies when you go from digital indirect bonding to digital custom indirect bonding. So it's got to be the right braces in the right place, and that's where the maximum efficiencies lie.